He had once ruled boardrooms with a single glance, signed deals worth millions before lunch, and believed control was the same as security, but the night the car spun on rain-slick asphalt and left him paralyzed from the waist down, that illusion shattered forever, and now Adrian Vale sat in a wheelchair inside the echoing shell of what used to be his mansion. The walls still grand but the warmth gone, the silence broken only by the faint whimper of his infant daughter, Lily, asleep in a crib. Nearby, unaware that the world she was born into was collapsing faster than anyone could stop it, the accident had taken his mobility, but it was betrayal that took everything else. His business partners siphoned funds while he was hospitalized, his lawyers stalled until accounts froze, investors fled at the scent of weakness, and the woman who once promised to stand beside him through anything packed her designer bags and vanished the moment the fortune stopped flowing, leaving behind nothing but a lawyer's letter and a cold calculation that love had an expiration date. Creditors circled like vultures, auction notices replaced framed art on the walls, and one by one the staff disappeared, except for Rosa, the quiet maid who had worked there for years, a woman most people never truly saw, who cleaned floors no one noticed and listened without being asked, who stayed not because she was paid. Sometimes weeks passed without a salary, but because she saw something no one else did, a broken man fighting not to drown in despair, and a helpless baby who needed someone brave enough to choose her when everyone else ran. The day the bank officers arrived to inventory the house, Adrian felt something inside him finally give way, his hands trembling as he stared at Lily, the weight of failure crushing his chest until breathing felt optional, and in that moment of weakness he whispered words he would later regret, telling Rosa to take the baby and leave, to save herself while she could. Because he was finished, ruined, useless, a man in a chair with no money and no future. But Rosa didn't move, didn't argue loudly or cry dramatically. She simply knelt beside him and looked him straight in the eyes and said with a calm strength he didn't know how to fight, "You are her father. And she is not leaving you. If anyone is walking away today, it won't be her." And those words landed harder than any insult ever could, because they carried truth instead of pity. When the officers returned the next morning with court orders and a social services representative questioned whether Adrian could even care for a child in his condition and financial ruin, it was Rosa who stepped forward, producing records she had quietly kept, doctor appointments she had scheduled, feeding logs she had maintained, nights she had stayed awake when Adrian couldn't even lift himself from the chair, proof not of wealth but of love. And when they tried to separate the baby temporarily, Rosa did something that stunned everyone. She refused to hand Lily over, not violently, not hysterically, but firmly, stating she would take legal responsibility herself if needed, because a child was not a debt to be seized or an inconvenience to be filed away. Days blurred into weeks as Adrian's world shrank to survival mode, selling the last of his watches, moving into a small, wheelchair-accessible apartment far from the life he once knew. While Rosa became more than a maid, she became the spine holding everything upright, working 2 jobs, cooking, caring for Lily, pushing Adrian to apply for rehabilitation programs, government assistance, anything that might keep them afloat. And though pride burned him from the inside, desperation taught him humility. And slowly, painfully, he learned to accept help. Late nights found him awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Lily's breathing and wondering how a man who once had everything could be saved by someone he had barely acknowledged before. And in those moments Rosa would sit at the small kitchen table, sorting bills, whispering plans, reminding him that value was not measured in what you could walk toward, but in what you refused to abandon. The turning point came when Rosa convinced him to record a raw, unfiltered video message, not to beg, but to tell the truth, about his fall, his paralysis, the betrayal, and the fear of losing his child. And when it was posted online, it spread like wildfire, not because he was a millionaire, but because he was honest, because people saw a father fighting from the ground up, and a quiet woman standing between a baby and the cracks of a cruel system. Donations followed, then opportunities, a former client offering a remote consulting role, a nonprofit providing adaptive technology, and for the first time since the accident, Adrian felt something close to hope, not the arrogant kind he once carried, but a fragile, earned hope built on gratitude and trust. Months later, as Lily took her first unsteady steps across the living room floor toward Rosa's open arms while Adrian watched from his chair with tears streaking down his face, he understood the full weight of what had happened. Not that he had lost everything, but that everything false had been stripped away so the real could remain, because when wealth vanished and power meant nothing, courage chose to stay, and it wore the uniform of a maid who refused to leave a baby behind. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that true heroes don't always arrive with titles or applause, then make sure you subscribe to this channel, because every story we share is a reminder that humanity still exists, courage still matters, and sometimes the smallest voices make the biggest difference.